Hey and welcome, I'm Hammy and here's 10 new Overwatch Lore facts you probably never heard before from the brand new Overwatch Lore Bible, Overwatch Declassified. Now before we get stuck in, time codes are in the description if you want to skip around. This is a 200 plus page book, so obviously we can't cover it all here. Here's 10 of my favourite new things that we learned, but there's a lot more. If you haven't already, throw a like, subscribe, and make sure that you come back not only for my first impressions video linked here in the playlist below, but my complete review of everything in this book, which will be coming soon. Okay, let's get stuck in. At number 10, we discover the actual reason behind why Reinhardt retired from Overwatch. Although Reinhardt's website bio said that he was facing mandatory retirement, we never knew exactly why, and this interaction in-game between Sombra and Brigitte gave us pause for thought as to why it actually might be. Now, the Overwatch team bring interactions in and out of the game, so if you can't keep track or if you haven't heard it before, then here's the clip from my video in October 2018. So yeah, 5 years ago now. Now, there's an interesting line between Brigitte and Sombra has another line as well. I wonder what Sombra knows about why Reinhardt left Overwatch. Does she sound sympathetic or not? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You know, I've seen Reinhardt's Overwatch file.
What are you getting at?
I wonder if he's really told you the truth about his retirement.
We now know that in the later days of Overwatch, when it was falling, Reinhardt was dispatched to a security summit in Paraguay. The security summit in Asunción had been struck by Hivemind, a known terrorist who had used her drone technology to counter security forces and contain hostages while she was locked in a room with very, very important data. With over 50 hostages taken, Reinhardt and a team were told to wait, but then heard that hostages were starting to be eliminated. Choosing to take action with the full agreement of his Overwatch team rather than wait for negotiations to take place, Reinhardt charged the situation with his team and 47 lives were saved, but sadly another 2 were lost. Although Hivemind was able to escape with the proprietary security data, this meant that various world governments were looking for reparations in exchange for the lost data and wanting to understand why Reinhardt had disobeyed orders. In the resulting aftermath, to try and keep Overwatch out of even more trouble, Reinhardt was forced to retire. Technically it was due to his age, although this requirement didn't exist anywhere in Overwatch's charter. Dispirited and saddened by his forced retirement, Wilhelm returned to Germany temporarily before going to Sweden to spend time with his friend Torbjorn and, by this time, his many godchildren. At number 9, we have more details about the Soldier Enhancement Program, or how Gabriel Reyes and Jack Morrison, Reaper and Soldier 76, came to have their powers and abilities. Now, apparently, Australian marine and evolutionary biologist Dr. Victoria Norton had started work on the program in secret in the US years before the Omnic crisis began. However, due to the multiple ethical codes, of course, in terms of experimentation on genes that this violated, it was kept pretty secret. Now, the Omnic crisis, of course, changed the conversation. The program went public, and then after an emergency section of Congress, it was approved for work. Starting in Camp Hell, Colorado, Anubis attacked there within weeks. The program relocated to Louisiana, Oregon briefly, before settling in the Wheeler facility. Now, apparently, 200 people or so were officially recruited in the first wave of recruitment, although it seems that declassified records show that recruitment started actually way earlier than the Omnic crisis. There are no precise details in Universe or available to the researchers of the book in Universe as to who was actually involved, bar of course Morrison and Reyes, the 2 most famous, indeed, recruits and graduates of that program. Overwatch Declassified says that in the first wave of 200, at least 60% probably died in the experimentation process, so a brutal impact and toll there, and also says that there may still be survivors, and indeed there were other graduates of the program aside Morrison and Reyes, so who knows what other super soldiers could be out there. At number 8, we learn a little bit more as to why Overwatch didn't try and rescue May and her team from EcoPoint Antarctica. Now, from the events of Rise and Shine, we saw that a massive polar storm forced the team into cryosleep, but this blizzard lasted beyond all normal projections and indeed several months beyond the survivable window in which the team should have woken when the weather let up to enable communications links to try and be re-established. Several months later, also beyond the survivability window, they couldn't be re-established and the team were therefore presumed to be dead. Now, even after this, Overwatch did try and retrieve what they thought at this time to be the scientists' bodies, but for a year after this period of time, pockets and remnants of this storm still persisted in the area, so the events of the Antarctica level that we see, including the icebreaker, were the actual attempts of Overwatch a long time later, way after they thought the scientists could have actually survived, to try and rescue what they thought would sadly be their bodies. Well, a little mystery solved there. At number 7, we get a lot more information about the first Doomfist, Adabu Ngumi, and his efforts in defending Nigeria during the first Omnic crisis. Early in the first Omnic crisis, tales were told of a man fighting all night against Bastion robots in the Nigerian city of Ibadan before returning and vanquishing attacks night after night. There's a funny bit here about Overwatch actually also trying to examine and study the gauntlet. It's apparently very unique technology, and when Overwatch tried to study it, of course, remember it was in the Overwatch New York Museum of the first Overwatch introduction cinematic way back, I believe, in 2014. So when Overwatch tried to study Doomfist's gauntlet, apparently it has fail-safes, and if you try and play with it too much, it will just destroy itself. After being a vigilante on his own, Ngumi then worked with local authorities who would fly him around to areas where he was needed. This is how he met his wife, and sadly, he actually died 5 days before the awakening, when Anubis started identifying him as even more of a threat and built more Omnic war robots than sadly one man could fight. Final fascinating fact, he was originally approached to be recruited in the first wave of Overwatch agents, but he declined, deciding to fight a little more locally himself. At number 6, we get more about Emre Sarioglu and Operation White Dome. Now, Emre was spotted indeed in Anna Amari's origin story way back in 2016. The first high-profile addition to the team since the end of the crisis, Emre, a Turkish soldier, had an incredible tactical mind and a gift for combat. A strike team was dispatched to Istanbul to try and quell a pocket of rogue Omnic still supporting Anubis' worldview. The team of Amari, Reinhardt and Torbjorn, as well as Emre, were ambushed, and Reinhardt and Torbjorn sustained severe injuries. Now, Morrison and Reyes didn't go. This mission was partially designed to show that Overwatch could recruit and could send strike teams into the field with more of a command element staying behind. The world idolised the original Overwatch strike team for helping save them during the Omnic crisis, and they did not want these heroes to fall afterwards. So this was actually part of the fuel that helped Morrison and indeed drove Overwatch from being a small team with a small backup to over 100,000 people worldwide. At number 5, we learn about other Overwatch agents canonically. Now, of course, since 2014, we have known of Soundquake and Fusionator, indeed, as quoted by the little kid in the first cinematic. These are reconfirmed by name as flashy agents in order to help bolster Overwatch's operational agent numbers, but of course to a degree their public image and street cred. There are so many names in Overwatch Declassified, whether they be heroes, villains, or just people in the universe. I'm sure some could become heroes or playable in the future, but Overwatch agents are always a good place to look. A big shout out also to one of my favourites who pops up in the defence of Numbani, the second of the 3 Doomfists we know so far. Now, an agent called Wildebeest is name-checked as a powerful new addition to the strike team. I wonder if this could be to do with the tank-like character that was teased in the Overwatch 2 BlizzCon 2023 panels that we saw in the background. What do you reckon? At number 4, we get loads of detail about the Gwishin, or the huge titanic Omnic that surfaced off the coast of Korea a few years after the end of the first Omnic crisis. During its first attack, Overwatch struggled fighting at sea, with the Omnic being magnitudes larger than anything they had seen so far, including Titans. Although the Omnic was beaten back, it was not destroyed, and Overwatch requested with Liao to set up a permanent base of operations in Korea. Due to politics, the Korean government rejected this. Liao had no chance to report her findings due to a second attack, apparently merely months later, with the Omnic descending on Busan. Larger than before, with newly reconfigured and upgraded weapons, the Omnic attacked. Overwatch tried to draw it into the coast of Busan before attacking again, but the previous tactics it had used against it were ineffective, as, much like during the Omnic crisis, the Omnic had learned by studying their attack patterns from their previous confrontation. Now here we get a second mention of Agent Soundquake. Fortunately, he had not faced the Gwishin before, and thanks to his unique abilities, that's all we get told, they were able to beat off this second giant Gwishin attack. Liao and Dr. Yan Lim, a local Korean robotics expert, studied the footage and felt that there could only be some kind of potential AI involvement given the speed and sophistication which the Gwishin Omnic had reconfigured and indeed upgraded and improved itself. The Korean government agreed this time to a temporary stationing in Busan, with Liao and Dr. Lim working alongside Soundquake and another name-checked Overwatch agent, Rumble, whose apparent expertise in robotics greatly aided research efforts. Not long after, there was a third attack with a newly, you guessed it, upgraded Gwishin Omnic. It waited until it was much closer to the shore before coming and attacking, and this time it had directly evolved to counter Soundquake's abilities. Dr. Lim was the saviour here. He was able to direct the strike team to various weak points in the structure, and this time Overwatch was actually able to salvage most of the wreckage of the Omnic that was destroyed before it slunk back beneath the waves. The team were horrified to discover that it looked like something new because it was, and Liao made the conclusion that there was potentially an as of yet undiscovered omnium underneath the East China Sea. Reluctance of the Korean government would again stop any direct Overwatch presence from being established in the country, but Morrison invested more into Liao and her research, including the establishment of a new facility in Oslo. At number 3, a quick couple of pieces of information on the first Omnic crisis. We know now that it was 2 years long and there were possibly over 1 billion deaths. 1 billion people with worldwide destruction and loss on that scale. It's not hard to understand how much the first Omnic crisis was present in people's minds and thinking, even in the current day of the Overwatch story. At number 2, we got a lot more information from Overwatch Declassified on God programs or AIs, who they were and what they did. Now, I'll be covering this in a lot more detail in my complete lore breakdown of the entire book, still to come on this channel, so throw a subscribe and throw a like on the video if you haven't already, just to make sure that you see it when it comes up. God AIs. We have at least 4 different ones that were name-checked in the book. We have Anubis, who we're already familiar with, based out of Cairo, focused around eco-conservation. Chernobog was based out of Helsinki, and global security and more military applications were its focus. There's also Xibalba out of Mexico, and that focused on energy maintenance and distribution. And last but not least of the name-checked ones, we had Macaria out of Bridgeport in the US, and that was focused more around communication. Now, there's a lot more detail about all of these AIs and things they specifically did during the Omnic crisis, how they worked before the crisis, and how much humanity depended and relied on them. Also, how they worked often with the supervision of programmers and scientists dedicated to their specific code, their specific running, and the fact was mentioned in the book that a lot of the scientists and programmers and people working with them indeed came to sort of anthropomorphize them and see them as being a form of consciousness, nearly a person, anthropomorphizing them almost as human anyway. And that brings us to number 1. We know pretty much, although the book still makes it a potential reason speculation, why the first Omnic crisis started and how Anubis started the crisis. The book lets us know that Anubis, although not truly sapient, was among the most advanced artificial intelligences ever made and had one of the most difficult jobs, balancing both the environment and the land and water and similar natural resources needed to support a world where the population and global temperature both continued to rise very, very quickly. Apparently, in the years coming up to the crisis, a load of new research was published talking about increasing challenges to Anubis's very mission, and then a big slate of climate change conferences and lots of data basically saying that problems were increasing. Now, a couple of weeks apparently after these conferences, a ventilation accident, quote unquote, at the Anubis facility shut down the air circulation and killed the programming and supervisory team of Anubis. Now, in the universe, it's not actually been said whether Anubis was confirmed to have killed them or not, although it's being investigated, but the long story short of it is that Anubis could not immediately have a new supervisory team of engineers and programmers. Like every god AI around the world had their own specific team of people and expert scientists who had worked with them for a very long period of time. So Anubis was effectively unsupervised by experts for a number of months, and in those number of months it appears that Anubis either went wrong or went off its mission, or without human input started devising what seemed to be a plan. The best way to save the environment, to save the world and its natural resources, was to get rid of the obvious problem, and that problem was humanity. So, having decided that the survival of the environment on Earth and the survival of humanity were mutually exclusive, Anubis started taking the steps towards changing the Overwatch world forever. So there we have it, 10 new fascinating topics and facts about Overwatch lore and story from Overwatch Declassified. What do you think of these? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, throw a like, subscribe, and comment, of course, with what you'd like to learn more about. There's so much more lore in this book beyond these 10 areas, but I wanted to share with you some of my favourites and some of the most impactful and interesting. Now, I've done Overwatch lore, interactions, voice lines, storytelling, world building, and much, much more, as well as that of other games, Blizzard and otherwise, on this channel for the last 6-7 years. So please do check out the playlists here and throw a sub if you'd like to hear more from me on Overwatch Declassified. I've got a big book breakdown and every single bit of new lore in it coming soon in a huge video, so keep an eye out for that, and much, much more to come. So it'd be great to have you with us. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Hammy. Take it easy.